So, when you think of Beowulf, you probably think of the story, right? A hero, some monsters, a big dragon fight. It's a classic. But what if I told you that the story of the poem is even more dramatic? We're not talking about the legend today. We're talking about the incredible, nail biting story of how it survived it all, a saga of fire, destruction, and just sheer dumb luck. And I mean that, literally. Every single word of Beowulf that we have today comes from one single, solitary manuscript. And that manuscript came within inches of being completely destroyed, just erased from history forever. Let's go back to 1731. There's a fire in a building in Westminster, London, and it just so happens to house the legendary library of Sir Robert Cotton, one of the most priceless collections of ancient manuscripts in the world. And inside is Beowulf. The book is scorched, its edges burned and crumbling, and even after it was saved from the flames, the damage kept going for decades, with letters and words just flaking away into dust. It was a close call, a terrifyingly close call. But that fire, that was just one chapter in this manuscript's absolutely harrowing story of survival. To really get how lucky we are to even be able to read this thing, we need to trace its journey across more than 1,000 years of history. I mean, just look at this timeline. It really shows you how improbable the whole thing is. It starts out as songs, way back in the 7th century, finally gets written down by a monk in the 10th, then it has to somehow survive Henry VIII basically wiping out the monasteries, only to then get nearly incinerated in that 1731 fire. Every single one of these steps was a potential end of the line for the story.
Let's zoom in on that one point, the 1530s, when King Henry VIII dissolved England's monasteries. Now, for literature, this was basically an apocalypse. See, monasteries were the great treasure houses of ancient learning, and their libraries were about to be scattered to the four winds. Can you even imagine? This quote from Bishop John Bale is just gut-wrenching. He's describing watching priceless, irreplaceable books, the entire history of a nation, being used as scrap, pages of wisdom being torn out to clean boots or sold to merchants to be used as wrapping paper. This was the world that the Beowulf manuscript had to survive. And if you want to get a sense of the scale of this, Bale tells a story about a merchant who bought the contents of 2 noble libraries for just 40 shillings. For over a decade, he used these priceless books as packing material. Beowulf itself could have so easily ended up lining a crate of fish, and we would never have known it existed. Thankfully, a few dedicated collectors basically swam against this tide of destruction. You had men like John Leland, the king's own antiquary, and Archbishop Matthew Parker, who worked to save what they could. Our manuscript was rescued by one of the most zealous of them all, Sir Robert Cotton. It found a home in his massive library, where it was catalogued as Cotton Vitellius A 15, which was named for the bust of the Roman Emperor Vitellius that stood over its bookcase. It was finally safe, or so they thought. So the manuscript survival is one miracle. But what about the poem itself? Where did it even come from? Well, before it was ever ink on parchment, Beowulf lived in the air, in the voices of poets and the memories of everyone who listened. Think of it like this. A real hero does something amazing. A professional poet, called a scop, makes up a song about it to entertain a king and his warriors in the mead hall. That song is so good, other poets learn it. Maybe they add their own flair, make the hero a little bit stronger, the monster a little bit scarier. Generations pass, and this story just grows and grows into a legend. And then finally, a Christian monk, probably around the 10th century, decides this oral masterpiece is just too good to lose and painstakingly writes the whole thing down. And this whole process gives the poem its really unique character. You've got these older, fatalistic Germanic beliefs in Wyrd, this idea of an unchangeable destiny, but woven all through it is the Christian monk's worldview, a belief in a single, all-powerful God. What you get is an Anglo-Saxon hero story told through a Christian lens, and that makes for a really layered and complex text. Okay, so we have this incredible story that miraculously survived. But what about the man at the center of it all? Let's talk about Beowulf himself. This is the big question, right? Was there a real-life warrior, somewhere back in time, who inspired all these incredible tales of monster slaying? And the answer, fascinatingly, is kind of yes and no. The poem grounds him in reality. It makes him a kinsman of King Hygelac of the Geats, and Hygelac is a figure we actually know existed from other historical records. But over centuries of being told and retold, this historical warrior seems to have merged with stories of a mythical god named Beowa, and he inherited all these supernatural abilities.
And that's how we get the hero who can do all these unbelievable things. He's got the strength of 30 men in his hand grip alone, he can swim for days, hold his breath for hours, and, single-handedly rip the arm off a monster. This is where the man ends and the full-blown myth takes over.
Now, to really appreciate the world of Beowulf, you have to understand the language they used to build it. Old English poetry has this incredibly powerful and unique way of describing things. One of the most famous literary devices from this time is something called a kenning. A kenning is basically a compound metaphor. It's a poetic and often really vivid way of naming something by describing what it does, instead of just using its normal name. Just look at these examples. The sea isn't just the sea, it's the whale's road. A ship is a sea wood. Your own body, that's your bone house. This kind of language isn't just descriptive, it's a whole way of thinking. It paints this world that feels rugged, elemental, and just deeply poetic. So we've traced its survival, we've looked at its creation, its hero, its language, but all of this brings us to the biggest question of all. Why does any of this matter today?
I mean, really, beyond just being a great story, why is the survival of this one, single, scorched manuscript so important to us more than 1,000 years later? Well, the answer is that Beowulf is so much more than a story. It's a monument. It captures a specific code of conduct, a set of ideals that were fundamental to that culture. Immense courage in the face of certain doom, absolute loyalty to your lord, and generosity to your followers. It's a portrait of what they considered to be the ideal hero. And ultimately, that's what it is. The survival of this single manuscript gives us our clearest window into the mind of the Anglo-Saxon world. We get to see their fears made real as monsters, their ideals embodied in a hero, and their world described in their own powerful words. It is a direct link to a lost time. And that kind of leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? We have Beowulf because of a series of lucky breaks and the passion of a handful of collectors. But it really makes you wonder, for every one Beowulf that survived, how many other epics, how many other heroes, how many other entire worlds were used to clean candlesticks or just burned ash, completely lost to us forever?